So to demonstrate this, the easiest of the three approaches, the conditional validation. What I pulled up here is our gym management system from last term. By the way, you can get this exact code as I have it here from Learning Moments in Resources, right? In our current community-sponsored project course, okay? So the idea here was, hey, I want to create a new instructor, right? But, you know, the guys here, I've hired him, but, you know, he actually is just relocating to the area. Bell is coming out next week to install his phone, so he doesn't have his phone number yet, right? Oh, and you know, they aren't quite sure when they're going to finish unloading all their furniture in the house, so the hire date, I'm not quite ready to enter that just yet. I could put the name information in, but see right now, if I click create without all this, I will not be allowed to actually start entering the data for this new instructor that I'm hiring, right, at my gym. So that's a bit of a problem, right? So that's what we're going to address. So just looking at it here, what I'm deciding is, well, you know what? The phone number I could leave out. He'll have an email address, right? So I want to have the name filled out as much as I require. First and last is the absolute requirement. And I want the email address, right? The rest of it can all be filled out later. The phone number once he gets his phone installed, the hire date once he's finished moving, and we can establish when he's going to actually start working, right? I can do that later. So that's our little scenario we're going to play around with here. Okay, so let me stop running for now. So here is my class. Now, I've made almost no changes. All I did is I rearranged the properties here just to kind of group so the things that are absolutely required, even to just start the record, the instructor record here. First name, middle name, last name. Of course, middle name actually is optional anyway. And the email address, right? So I just rearranged things inside the class here a little bit. So the next two should be optional at first until we've completed, right? So I'll have my hire date and my phone number. I haven't changed them yet. I just rearranged them. Now, we already had an is active, but that was for something else altogether. That's nothing to do with what we're doing today. And then there are the different ways it relates. And that's fine. We can leave that in place here for the main entity, you know, that the instructor might teach group classes or help, you know, with workouts and things like that, right? So we are going to be making some changes here as we go through, right? So I didn't want to do it too much ahead of time. Okay. So to make it work, the first thing I'm going to do is I want to add is draft, or if you prefer, you could switch it around and say is complete, right? Whichever way you want to go. We're going to add a new property. It's almost going to be the same as this one, okay? In fact, I might put it right here, okay? I'm going to call it is draft, okay? I'm going to set it to true. Now, if I did is complete and had it false by default, then I don't even have to worry about generating the record first. But yeah, that's okay. I just that's the way my brain works, is I have something is checked off as true that it's a draft. I'll uncheck it when it's no longer a draft, right? Okay. So I've added that one property. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and say, well, you know what? My hire date, I don't want that to be required. So I'm just going to comment it out for now. Same with the phone number. I can leave, okay? I can leave the data type date, the display format, because those all work fine, okay? Data type here, string length. If it's null, those don't complain. They're happy enough, okay? If it's still null, but that's the other thing, I have to make these nullable now, right? They will not be required, they will be nullable. Okay, and now I should be able to create one of these and leave that information out. Of course, I'll have to make some adjustments here and there for it as well, right? But that's the general idea. Now let me come down to iValidatable object, right? So here in our validate event, right, we had these tests on the hire date. If it was before they opened for business, well, that's not a valid. Can't be more than 1 month in the future, right? So that makes sense. We had those checks in place before. But now we have to think about, can we do those? Well, wait, this might even be null. So no, what we have to do is we have to modify this a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it conditional validation. Okay? So I will say if, right? If it's not a draft anymore. So I won't even do those tests. If I'm still a draft version of the record, I won't even bother with any tests in here, basically. right? But what I'm going to do now, I'm essentially moving that code, but I'm rearranging it a little bit at the same time. So let me just get my new version in place and I'll take that out. Okay? So if it's not true that we're still in draft mode, then I'm going to first check the required. Okay? Is it null? Right? It's allowed to be null now, but so if it's null, then I'm going to add a validation result. Higher date must be entered. Well, that's like my required, right? And that was satisfying what I commented out up here, where I commented out this required, okay? You know what? If I want, I could even use this same, I didn't think of it earlier. I use the exact same message here as well. So you would never know about that change because it'll function the same way, just that until it's no longer a draft as a completed record, it won't even bother checking that, right? And here I'm saying what input control the error message should appear beside. So it's going to show up in the exact same place as it would have before, right? Now, if it's not null, my else branch here has the exact same test that I had in place earlier when we started this demo, right? Making sure it wasn't before the gym opened, not more than 1 month in the future, right? And there we go. Okay, so that's good for the hire date. Also, the phone number. The only thing we changed about it is we took out required, right? So here I'm going to check if it's null, then I'll say the phone number is required, right? Is that the same message I had up here? Yeah, it is. Okay. All right. So now it will check that, but only if, okay, we're no longer in draft mode. All right. So you can see how the logic works here. Now, that's the only changes I have to make except for in our summary properties. There's some of our summary properties here that were basically set up to assume, of course, that things are filled in, right? So I just have to make a couple little changes here in order to actually have this work with the new arrangement of our nullable properties, right? So I think the seniority and these two, okay, you can feel free to compare. I'll put my copy-paste file up so you have it. So all I really did is I'm checking here, okay, if the hire date is null, then I'll just return unknown date for seniority, right? Or unknown. I should probably just say unknown, come to think of it, because it's really the seniority. Otherwise, okay, we say how many years of seniority the person has. And down here, okay, again, if the hire date is not equal to null, then we give the expression we had before. Otherwise, we just say unknown. And same sort of thing for the phone number, okay? If it's not null, right, then we show the phone number formatted. Otherwise, I'm just going to show an empty string, right? And that will be an okay as a string property to display on the page, right? So because now we have to allow for things might still be null, just think about the logic you use and the expressions you build in your summary properties, and that should take care of it. Away you go. And that's it. But of course, the whole UI was built, okay, on some assumptions, plus we've added a new property. So the next thing I really need to do is go into the actual instructor views, come down here to instructor, right? On both the create and edit view, I need a new div here, right, for the checkbox for is draft. Now, because I already have one down here for is active, it makes sense I might as well put it right beside it, okay? So ASP for is draft, okay? In fact, I could copy that one and, and just use it. And the exact same thing goes on to the create as well, right? So that way I can now maintain whether it's a draft or not. Now, I'm using draft as an example, but as we talked about in our discussion, you might, if there's possible stages to the overall process, then instead of a true, false, a Boolean, you might use something like an enumeration where you have a drop-down list then of different statuses. And all it is, it's a matter of going into the code here, right? Instead of just if is draft, you know, if it's an enumeration, of course, the initial value by default is 0, then 1, then 2 for each value. So if it's like greater than or equal to 1, then do these checks. If it's greater than or equal to 2, then you know it's also on to the next stage and do these checks, right? So it's just a simple matter of getting that code in place. Okay. Now, you know, we might as well show it on the details view as well. So that's not hard to do. I'll maybe do it right again near the is active Boolean. Okay, so right here, throw in the is draft as well. Now, one of the things, because I chose, it was my choice, but because I chose, when we come up to the controller now for instructor, to go with is draft, which should be, we want to make sure it's true when you first create the record, right? Then it does make a little bit of a change here that in the actual, let me go Control MO, shrink everything down just so it takes so long to scroll here. So if I come to the get for create, the default arrangement normally is just return view, right? We don't even actually provide a model object when you're first creating, but it always is an option. And it's an option that I'll often take advantage of if I'm going to have some default values that I want in place for the new object, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually new up an instructor. I don't have to change anything, right? Because I defined that, you know, when you new up this object, draft will be set, is draft will be set to true, right? And then I just pass in the instructor object to the view. I wouldn't have to do that if I'd gone with is complete, which I would start off assuming is false. I would be able to skip this step altogether, but just the way my mind works, the is draft is a good thing. Okay, so that's good there. That is all right. Let's come down to the post now, right? Because we have an additional property. You remember what this is for, our bind, our whitelist. Only these properties specifically are going to be allowed to be accessible as we build our instructor object. So obviously, we need to add is draft there. Otherwise, the input control we have on the screen, the data doesn't get actually passed in here. And the exact same thing is true for the post for edit, right? Now, of course, the approach is a little different here. We're using try update model, okay? So we want to go here as well to be consistent. P goes, oh, that's what I get, is draft. Okay. All right. So that, I think, should do the job. Now, of course, I've added a new property, right? So I really should think about migrations and so on, but I cheated. Well, it's not cheating. I was lazy. I came in here into Program CS and I told it to delete the database and to bypass migrations and just use the ensure created approach. I did that just so I don't have to bother taking time during the demo to generate a new migration. Probably I would have been just as quick to do that because I noticed when I did a test run earlier, because I deleted the database and I'm seeding so much darn seed data that it actually takes a little while to come up here. So I might not have actually saved any time. I just saved myself some work, you might say. But we'll see the difference in functionality here in a moment. Do, 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 do. Come on, finish seeding data. There we go. All right, I have to log in. Oh, good, it remembers my credentials. So let's come down to instructor. And if I do create new again, see, there's my draft record. So if I just click the create button now, look at that. It's only complaining about first, middle, first name, last name, and email. It doesn't nag me about the phone number or the hire date, right? So I can put in values here, David. Oh gosh, I can't even type today. Of course, you're used to that. Okay, I click create. No, it still needs email at Niagara College.ca. Okay. Now, can I save this? Can I create? Yes, I can. Now, if I go to that record, right, bring up details, you can see, okay, it's still a draft. If I go to edit, right, it still shows it as a draft. Now, if I were to take off draft and click save, there we go. Now it says, wait, you're no longer a draft record. You have to provide this additional information, right? And if I just put in a phone number, then that's happy, but this one won't be happy, right? And until I get the hire date in, I can't actually save it unless I go back to saying it's a draft. Now I can leave the phone number there and save it as a draft record. No problem. That's good, right? And we bring up details there. I see the phone numbers there. Everything is good. But, I'm getting exactly the functionality I needed. I'm not being held up, okay, by the hire date and the phone number. I can create the record. I can start uploading documents. I could use this instructor, start assigning them to classes and so on and so forth. There we go. So we successfully made the changes to progressively increase the validation requirements as we change the status of the record itself. Any questions about that demo? Alrighty then.